Ordinary life, in the months before a wedding, moved like a parade of lists. I tracked deposits, RSVP tallies, and seating charts in color-coded tabs. I liked how tasks clicked closed. Dress fitting, check. Menu tasting, check. Hotel block, check. My fiancé texted photos of cufflinks, the lakefront venue at sunset, and a cake sample too perfect to cut. Our families traded travel plans and recipe stories while the florist promised peonies that would survive July heat. I rehearsed the walk down an aisle that still felt hypothetical, an equation whose variables were love, time, and good weather. He said the tux would be ready early and that his bachelor plans were tame. Friends sent playlists and childhood photos for the slideshow. I believed happiness could be organized if I kept the spreadsheet honest and the budget realistic. Nothing in that season suggested a second narrative was writing itself nearby, turning corners just out of my sight. Small disturbances arrived disguised as logistics stretching like taffy. He added last-minute client meetings to the calendar and shrugged at the rehearsal dinner timeline. His phone stayed face down on counters, buzzing with notifications labeled vaguely as shipping updates and event reminders. A tuxedo pickup shifted twice, then a third time, explained as tailoring delays. He came home from a bachelor gathering smelling like a bar I did not recognize, sweet and floral rather than smoky. The venue coordinator emailed him twice about final counts without hearing back, and I forwarded the messages with a neutral note. When I mentioned vows, he pivoted to chair rentals. He called the band by the wrong name and brushed it off as stress. None of it seemed catastrophic, only enough to make the house feel slightly out of level, as if a marble set loose would roll someplace new. First suspicions arrived as the absence of things I expected to see. He stopped liking the shared album where we gathered snapshots from fittings and cake tests, and his replies to vendors turned clipped. He became oddly protective of his schedule, requesting quiet that our home already offered. My aunt mailed a family brooch for something borrowed, and he moved the box to a high shelf without noticing the note tucked inside. A bridesmaid mentioned seeing him near the boutique district on a weekday when he claimed to be across town. He explained the detour as traffic avoidance and kissed the air near my temple without meeting my eyes. I began waking before dawn, checking lists as if one more task might restore equilibrium. The dog started sleeping by the door instead of the bed, alert to footsteps that never arrived. The unease remained quiet but measurable, like pressure changing before a storm. Tangible clues refuse sentimentality. They tally. The joint account logged a purchase at a boutique hotel downtown for a room type meant for two, coded under a corporate-sounding alias. Rideshare receipts landed in the shared email at hours that did not match his explanations, starting and ending near the hotel and a florist unrelated to ours. A second set of cufflinks, engraved with initials not his, arrived on our porch with expedited shipping. His suit jacket pocket produced a folded reservation sleeve printed with dates that overlapped our rehearsal. A single receipt from a champagne bar hid in the glove compartment like a misplaced confession. The pattern drew itself without my permission, lines connecting places that had no business touching. I printed the statements, slid them into a folder, and labeled it simply, Wedding Week. Naming it kept me from pretending it belonged to some other life. Verification demanded presence, not confrontation. The day before the wedding, I told my mother I needed air and drove downtown with the calm of someone measuring a room. The boutique hotel smelled like polished wood and citrus, and I sat in the lobby with a magazine I did not read. Elevators sighed, a bellman arranged vases, the clock on the wall clicked forward without ceremony. At 3:17, my fiancé swept through the revolving door with a woman whose dress matched the flowers he had never asked me about, hand on her lower back with a practiced ease. They moved like a couple trained by repetition, laughing softly, the kind of laughter that floats when no translation is required. At the desk he flashed a key already made, and they disappeared into an elevator that closed with a confident hush. I remained seated, counting breaths until the number steadied. Confirmation settled without theatrics, heavy and precise. I rode a different elevator to the listed floor and stopped short of their hallway, unwilling to turn curiosity into spectacle. Their door closed with a seal of habit, and the corridor fell into the muffled privacy of carpeted places. A room service card on a stand promised half bottles of champagne and chocolate-dipped fruit, details suddenly clinical. My phone still held the evening's task list: welcome bags, rehearsal walkthrough, last-minute seating swaps, and each item dissolved like sugar in tea. There was nothing to interrupt. The interruption had already happened, clean as a cut. Back in the lobby, a song from our playlist drifted from a speaker, and the ring in my bag felt abruptly dense, a paperweight pinning down a draft I would not publish. I did not cry. I took the stairs to the street, each flight a sentence toward a decision, and stepped into heat that made everything honest. Immediate fallout was a day rearranged into decisions. I drove home, canceled the manicure, and sat at the kitchen table with a folder and a pen. I wrote actions that protected the people who mattered: inform parents, notify bridal party, pause vendor arrivals, and secure the venue. I composed messages that used clean sentences and small words, honoring fact without roaming into spectacle. I called the coordinator to hold all access while I determined next steps, and her measured silence said she understood more than I had said aloud. I placed the ring in its box and set it beside the list like an object to be inventoried, not a relic to be mourned. I changed the front door code and switched my phone to Do Not Disturb, allowing only family through. Then I poured water, drank it entirely, and stood up into the next hour. Cutting ties required steadiness. I told my parents privately that the wedding would not proceed and asked them to redirect their instinct for repair toward logistics. My mother's hands stacked napkins before she remembered they were irrelevant, then she shifted to hotel blocks and shuttle buses. My father offered to escort relatives to the beach and parcel out explanations without assigning blame. I texted the bridal party that plans had changed, thanked them for love that would outlive this event, and directed inquiries to me alone. A bridesmaid volunteered to collect signage so vendors would not arrive to a locked hall. I blocked him on social platforms to stop reflexive scrolling, not as punishment but as guardrail. I emailed the officiant a brief cancellation and asked the venue to post a discreet sign for arrivals. I carried his suit bag to the hall closet and closed the door on it like a file I would not reopen soon. Legal and practical logistics formed a scaffolding where vows had been. The caterer applied the deposit to a future event credit, and I instructed them to donate perishables to a shelter. The photographer kept part of the retainer and returned the rest with a short note about integrity, which I saved. The venue cited the contract and waived penalties after reviewing correspondence. I printed the email and filed it behind a tab labeled Outcomes. The band released the date graciously. I contacted the travel agency to cancel the honeymoon and donated the non-refundable excursion to a raffle for a community clinic. I documented each call and confirmation number, building a ledger that felt like a bridge I could walk. The printer hummed, spitting confirmations I hole-punched and clipped, a small symphony of order replacing an orchestra that had gone off-key. By evening, the disaster had edges I could understand. Family dynamics widened like concentric rings in water. His mother called my mother with the timbre of a person holding fragile glass, and they agreed to let us manage the frontline communication. Younger cousins posted photos from the beach instead of the chapel and captioned them with jokes that redirected curiosity. A bridesmaid delivered snacks to my porch and confirmed she had informed the hair and makeup teams so no one would knock on a closed door. I wrote a short note for guests who had already traveled, explained that an unforeseen issue required cancellation, and promised refunds where applicable. Neighbors left flowers without notes, and I placed them in water like small flags of mercy. The officiant emailed a blessing unmoored from the ceremony and reminded me that a saved self can be a sacred vow. I slept for 2 hours and woke able to stand without shaking. Rebuilding began in small circles I could actually complete. I returned borrowed cake stands and ribbon wands to friends who had collected them, each hand off a quiet goodbye to a version of a day that no longer existed. I took a long walk past storefront windows that reflected a woman I recognized and decided recognition was enough for now. I booked a massage for the week that would have been the honeymoon, scheduled a meeting with a therapist, and moved the dress appointment to a fitting that turns gowns into NICU blankets. I changed my email filters so his name slid to a dedicated folder reviewed only once daily. I scrubbed the kitchen counters, opened the windows, and let the heat carry out the scent of melted sugar from the cake samples. A new notebook labeled Future Lists appeared on the table, pages blank and patient. Reflection arrived as a workable story rather than a performance. I had not been foolish to plan joy, I had been generous. He had not tripped into betrayal, he had organized it. My job was not to punish, but to protect the life I still owned and the people who showed up with kindness instead of commentary. I learned that a canceled wedding can be a life-saving event, a fire drill that reveals which doors open and which alarms were always silent. I will send thank you notes for the love that arrived without instruction, return keys that no longer fit, and keep the ring boxed as evidence of a lesson, not a loss. When the lakefront venue posts new photos next season, they will simply be pictures of a place by water. Forward looks ordinary and therefore precious, measured in clear mornings and a door that locks behind me.